The first time she heard it, she stopped before her foot even touched the ground, because the sound of her step had already echoed at the end of the hallway. And if you're someone who notices when reality feels just slightly out of order, you might want to stay with this story, because from that moment on, Seraphine Holt realized something she couldn't explain. She was no longer walking first. Something else was walking for her. It was the winter of 1901, in a quiet boarding house just outside York, England, a place where the wooden floors carried every sound too far, where the walls remembered movement longer than they should, and where silence never truly meant nothing. Seraphine Holt had lived there for nearly a year, long enough to understand its rhythm, long enough to trust its quiet patterns. She was a careful woman, observant, deliberate, someone who believed that everything had a reason if you paid enough attention. That belief made the first incident easier to dismiss and far more dangerous to ignore later. That night, just after midnight, she stepped out of her room to walk toward the staircase at the end of the corridor. The gas lamp flickered softly above, casting uneven shadows along the narrow hallway. Her first step sounded normal, a soft creak beneath her shoe, but before she could take the second, she heard it. A second step, clear, distinct, but not hers, ahead of her. Landing exactly where she was about to step, she froze mid-motion, her foot still slightly lifted, her body suspended between movement and stillness. The hallway remained empty. No doors had opened. No one had passed. And yet, the sound had come. She lowered her foot slowly. Silence. Then she stepped again and again. The sound came first. Not echoing, not delayed, but ahead, perfectly placed. As if something invisible was walking the path before her, repeating her movement before she made it. The next morning, she forced herself to forget it. Old buildings distort to sound. That's what she told herself. Wood bends. Air carries echoes strangely. That explanation stayed with her until the second night, and the third, and the fourth. Each time, the same pattern. One step ahead. Always ahead. She began testing it. Small changes at first, short steps, longer strides, sudden stops. Nothing changed. Because no matter what she did, the footsteps were already there, waiting. By the end of the week, she noticed something worse. The timing wasn't random, it was exact. Every step she would take, already completed, as if her movement existed before she created it. One evening, she mentioned it quietly to another resident, a man named Elias Thornbridge, who had lived in the boarding house far longer than she had. "Have you ever noticed the floors carrying sound strangely?" she asked. Elias looked at her for a moment, then shook his head slowly. "Old wood creaks," he said, "but it doesn't lie." That answer stayed with her, because that's exactly what it felt like. Not a distortion, not a mistake, but something deliberate. The nights grew longer after that, and the footsteps grew bolder. At first, they had been close, just one step ahead, then two, then three, as if whatever it was moving faster, reaching further ahead of her path. And then came the night it didn't wait for her at all. She stood in the middle of the corridor, completely still, her hands at her sides, her breathing slow and controlled. She had decided not to move, not to give it anything to follow. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a single step echoed, far ahead, at the end of the hallway. Her heart tightened because she hadn't moved. And yet, the step had happened. That was the moment she understood something far worse. It didn't need her. It wasn't following her. It was already ahead. She began avoiding the hallway, staying inside her room, limiting her movement. But even there, it followed. Soft steps across the wooden floor, just beyond her own. Sometimes stopping when she stopped. Sometimes continuing when she didn't. Sleep became difficult, not because of fear alone, but because of anticipation, because every time she moved, the sound came first. And every time it came first, it reminded her of something she couldn't accept, that she wasn't leading her own movement. One night, unable to ignore it any longer, she made a decision. She would walk the full hallway, from beginning to end, no stopping, no hesitation, no turning back. If the footsteps were ahead, then she would follow them, step by step, until there were none left. The corridor felt longer that night, narrower, colder. The gas lamp flickered above, casting shadows that stretched further than they should. She stood at the start, took a breath, and stepped forward. A footstep echoed. Ahead, she continued. Another step, another sound, further ahead now, faster, as if it was trying to stay beyond her reach. She didn't stop, didn't hesitate. Her pace increased, so did the distance. The footsteps moved further ahead, reaching the end of the hallway before she did. And then, silence. She slowed, her breath unsteady, her heart racing, because for the first time, there were no more steps left. She reached the end and stopped, because something inside her finally understood what she had been avoiding all along. The footsteps hadn't been leading her. They had been finishing her. Every step she would ever take in that hallway had already been walked, and now there were no steps left to hear. The silence that followed felt heavier than any sound she had heard before. Not empty, not quiet, but complete, as if something had ended. And in that moment, she realized something she could never unlearn. She had not been hearing the future. She had been hearing the end of her own movement, before she reached it. And now, I want to ask you something. If you realized that every step you were about to take had already been completed somewhere ahead of you, that your path wasn't something you were creating, but something you were catching up to, would you keep walking, or would you stop, knowing there might be nothing left ahead? Tell me your answer in the comments. And if stories like this stay with you longer than they should, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay for the next story.